in New Zealand, those who trained him and those who scripted him published a sort of a manifesto just before the attack took place.
Yes.
And in that manifesto, Constantinople is there in pride of place.
That's right.
He uses the name Constantinople and he uses the name Hagia Sophia.
That's right.
And by going into a masjid and killing 50, he didn't want 50. They wanted 500. They didn't get the 500 because the Lord God stopped them. If they had got the 500 they wanted, there would have been millions of people on the streets of Turkey agitating and demanding that Hagia Sophia be reopened as a masjid.
Right.
The Turkish government would then have said to the Russian government, what can we do? And they would then reopen the masjid and hope the Turkey's relations with Russia could survive.
Welcome to episode 34 of Independent Thought and Freedom. The recent massacre in New Zealand has sharply brought back into focus the global, persistent issues of extremism, nationalism, religious warfare, globalism, immigration, national destabilization, the role and view of Islam in the contemporary world, among other things. One very important global voice to help us understand these issues is Sheikh Imran Nazar Hossain, a very independent-minded Islamic thinker of international repute. He is an Islamic scholar, an author, philosopher, specializing in Islamic eschatology, world politics, economics, and modern socio-economic and political issues. He's the author of Jerusalem in the Quran and more than 24 other books, many of them devoted to topics in Islamic eschatology, already published. Born in Trinidad, Sheikh Hossain served as principal of the Alimia Institute of Islamic Studies in Karachi, Pakistan, as well as Imam at Masjid Dar al-Quran in Long Island, New York. He studied Islam at Al-Azhar University in Cairo. He also led the weekly Jummah prayers and delivered the sermon at the United Nations headquarters in Manhattan once a month for 10 years. I want to warmly welcome Sheikh Imran Hossain to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Meighoo. I'm honored to be on your podcast.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I wanted to speak to you for a while because I think your insights are very unique, unusual, and extremely important. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, just to start off as a kind of icebreaker almost, is who has been your biggest influence personally to help you think so independently?
It's not a person, it's a book.
Right.
The Quran has taught me the art of critical thinking.
Okay.
And the man who taught me the Quran, who gave me the methodology for study of the Quran, my teacher, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Rahman Ansari, he was the one who took my hand and helped me to be able to study and understand the Quran. But the art of critical thinking, it's beautifully explained in the Quran.
Right. Because a lot of people might not think of it that way, because they would think that, with the way most people learn the Quran and memorizing verses and actually not being very critical about it, just following things by the letter, people might be surprised to hear you say that. Would you agree that that would be a popular view, at least?
They would be absolutely correct. It is very sad for me to say what I have to say now, but Dr. Meighoo, the world of contemporary Islamic scholarship have failed the Quran. They have not studied the Quran. It is something sad. I am not boosting my own ego in any way. It is very painful for me to say this. They are my peers, they are my brothers, these are men and women who have devoted their lives to the study of the Quran. They have integrity, they have courage, they have devotion, they have piety, but they have not really studied the Quran. And as a consequence of this, the challenges of the modern age, they have failed in responding to them.
Right. Yeah, well, that's very, very interesting, and I want to explore that. So, could you just give us a little background on, say, your mission and work? Because you have, is it an international organization you have? Is that correct? Am I right to think that?
No. When I resigned from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Trinidad and Tobago in 1985, I launched on an independent career. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was appointed as the principal of the Alimi Institute of Islamic Studies in Karachi, Pakistan, where I had once been a student.
Right.
But I survived for only 2 years because the management, after the death of Dr. Ansari, management wanted me to declare that the Shia were all non-Muslims, they're outside of Islam. And I said, get lost. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. This sectarian, this very damaging and dangerous sectarian warfare in Islam, the Sunni Shia warfare. So I've stood aloof from that warfare, and I recognize the Shia as Muslims, and I traveled to Iran several times. Mr. Trump is not going to stop me from doing that. And I have invariably been welcomed in Iran with great respect and love and affection, even though I differ with them.
Right.
On many of their Shia beliefs, yeah.
So you are a Sunni?
Yes, I am Sunni, but when I study the Quran, I'm neither Sunni nor Shia, I'm Muslim.
Right. Mm-hmm. I was told, and you can correct me if it's wrong, but I was told that you are considered a Sufi, following the Sufi scholars?
I was educated, I was taught, I was introduced to Sufism by my teacher, Maulana Dr. Fazlur Rahman Ansari. And I recognize...
Where was that? Was that in Egypt or in India or Pakistan?
In Pakistan, yeah. But I recognize Sufism to be the very heart of Islam, the religious way of life. In a nutshell, Sufism is to be able to see with the light of God, to see what otherwise cannot be seen, to see with the internal eye. And so this is epistemology. It differs from the secular epistemology, where knowledge comes only from external observation and rational inquiry. So Sufism tells us that there's an inner eye, there's something called spiritual insight, and you will never be able to penetrate the reality of the world today, particularly as it pertains to money. The movement from gold and silver to bogus and fraudulent paper money, to cryptocurrencies, to bitcoins, and then finally to one currency, which would come from one central bank. And of course, you know who is going to control that bank, and therefore who is going to control that one currency in the world. I'm not scared to say it's the the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. So it is this insight that you need when you come to study monetary economics. When I meet with my teachers who are scholars of monetary economics, I see this lacunae, I see their incapacity to penetrate the reality of monetary economics. So this is what Sufism has done. But now, the Sufis of themselves, they have introduced many religious practices which were not there in the original Islam. And I don't want to have to spend my time devoted to defending religious institutions which are not a part of the original faith, or even though they're beneficial. So I no longer identify myself as Sufi.
Oh, that's very interesting, because I mean I know as part of the kind of I don't know, the schisms, the warfare going on in the Islamic world. I know. Tell me if I have the terminology right, but from my understanding, it's, you know, more the sort of Wahhabi, Salafist sort of sects. You know, and they may have been the ones who have asked you in Karachi to say that the Shia are not Muslims, that Sufi are not Muslims. Is that correct in my understanding?
The sectarian divide preceded us. The world of Judaism was divided, sectarian warfare. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they were actually fighting with each other, the Jews. The world of Christianity has been broken up into bits and pieces through sectarian warfare. Mm-hmm. The Hindu world also has suffered the same fate of sectarian warfare, so it's nothing new.
That's right.
And so this sickness and this disease has come to Islam as well. But you'll also find amongst Hindus, you'll find amongst Jews, you'll find amongst Christians, and you'll find amongst Muslims those who want to rise above the sectarian divide.
Yes.
And when you find such people, you find people who have a capacity to put their feet on the foundations of truth, and therefore to cross the divide and build bridges between each other. Mm-hmm. This is our response to sectarianism.
Right. So does that put you in conflict? Well, I suppose it would put you in conflict with many other schools of thought. I mean, it appears to me. I've read somebody say that the sort of turmoil going on in the Islamic world today is similar to what was going on, I suppose, right after Martin Luther's break with the Western Church, and that whole long period in Europe of warfare between the Catholics and Protestants that really had its echo up to the 20th century in Ireland, with the Protestants and Catholics still there, and that it's a similar sort of process. Do you see that parallel as being valid?
I am very pleased with this question of yours. The parallel is, yes, it is there, but it's a parallel between the Sunni-Shia divide in the world of Islam, and the parallel in the Christian world is not Protestant Catholicism. It is the breakaway of the Western Church when they broke away from Constantinople.
Yeah.
So you have Western Christianity and Eastern Christianity.
So you're putting it back to that time, right? Yeah, because I know there are these two great splits. Yeah.
This is the comparable split. The split between Eastern Christianity or Orthodox Christianity and Western Christianity. And that split is absolutely, absolutely, absolutely of strategic importance. So you have to study it to be able to understand contemporary politics, to understand the emergence of modern Western civilization, which is an essentially godless civilization.
Godless?
Yes?
Right. Okay. Very interesting. I want to hear you continue.
Yes. The emergence of modern Western civilization with a godless agenda, with an arrogant agenda of stamping its rule over the rest of the world, with ruthless exploitation as an oppressor of the rest of the world, stealing in broad daylight the wealth of the world. They're still doing up to now. They just seize whatever Venezuela had. They just seized it, and they offered no apologies. This modern Western civilization came out of the bosom of that part of the Christian world which broke away from Constantinople.
Yes.
And so it is not the Protestant Catholic divide that is so important. It is the Western Eastern Christian divide which is more important. And we have, from eschatology, we have a lot to say about it. The Quran has spoken significantly about it. And you cannot explain the rise of Russia today as the dominant military power in the world. We recognize it, of course, but we have blinkers on their eyes. They won't recognize it until the nuclear war starts. And when the nuclear war starts, they have some surprises, some long overdue surprises, Dr. Meighoo.
Because a lot of people don't realize that Moscow is considered the third Rome. Because after the fall of Rome, then the move to Constantinople, and Constantinople was the head of the church, and then the Eastern Church, the Byzantine, and then after the fall of Constantinople, Moscow became the head of the Orthodox Church. So is that what you're referring to?
Well, I don't say there was a fall of Rome, because Rome was a pagan city.
Okay.
What Constantine did was to take the Roman Empire out of Rome and take it to a new capital
Mm-hmm. Modern Turkey.
The name of Constantinople.
Bosphorus.
It used to be something else.
Yes.
I can't remember.
Yeah, before it was Constantinople, correct. I can't remember if it was Bosphorus or something like that.
The name before Constantinople, anyhow. And then that became the capital city of a holy Roman Empire, not a pagan Roman Empire. So a holy Roman Empire emerged on the stage of history for the first time. It must not be confused. It is not a successor of a pagan empire. Okay. This is a new phenomenon on the stage of history. A Christian state.
Right.
When they were expelled, when the Israelites were expelled from the Holy Land by the Roman Empire, the pagan Roman Empire, one part of the Israelite world had celebrated when they saw him crucified. Mm-hmm. And the other part of the Israelite world was weeping because they accepted him as the Messiah. Mm-hmm. That part which was celebrating, they became known now as the Jews. This is the first time you have the term Jew. Okay. And they were broken up and scattered all over the world and never allowed to return to the Holy Land to reclaim it as their own until, according to the Quran, until Gog and Magog are released. And they are very, very, very important actors in politics and in economics, Gog and Magog. Until Gog and Magog are released, and they spread out in all directions, they will then bring them back to the Holy Land.
Could you explain Gog and Magog? I'm not familiar with it. I've heard the word before, but I don't.
That's going to take some time, Dr. Meighoo.
Right. Okay, well...
Eschatology, both Christian eschatology, Jewish eschatology, Islamic eschatology, all speak of Gog and Magog.
Mm-hmm. I've heard, but I've not delved into it.
Yeah, this is eschatology. It's beyond the scope of secular scholarship.
Yeah,
they are human beings who are created by the Lord God and endowed with a power that none can destroy except He Himself. Only He could destroy it. This explains the success of the Ottoman Empire against the Orthodox Christians. This explains the success of the Mongol Empire against the Hindus in India. The power of Gog and Magog is such that only He, the Lord God, can destroy it. And Gog and Magog, when they are released, they spread out in all directions. So you get a world order of Gog and Magog eventually. And these are the people who are going to bring the Jews back to the Holy Land to reclaim it as their own. This has now been achieved. It is modern Western civilization which brought them back. You cannot study politics. No. You have to be a schoolboy. If you see something happening in your world, 2,000 years after a people were expelled from their city, from their land, and banned from returning, and then after 2,000 years, they returned mysteriously so to reclaim it and to restore a state of Israel. And you are a political scientist, and you have not asked what is the explanation for this. This implies you got homework to do.
Yeah.
So now yeah, go ahead.
When you speak of Gog and okay, before we even get to the details of it, what would be interesting to talk about is you were trained in Western international relations. You were a part of the system in terms of you were a foreign service officer. You were trained by one of your professors who you admire and thank very, very much is Dr. Leslie Manigat, who was president of Haiti for a little while as well. So can you describe how you made the transition and what you saw as the weakness? You hinted that part of the weakness, going from the sort of Western secular understanding of politics, geopolitics, history, because you're well versed and well trained in that. And then what made you go to a more metaphysical, spiritual, however you want to phrase that way, a non-secular way of understanding geopolitics?
I did not enter into international relations until I was age 30 in 1972. But from the time I was age 21, I had already left Trinidad to go to study in Egypt. I spent one academic year in Egypt, and I said that was enough, because I'm not seeing the kind of scholarship here that I long for. And then I left and I went to Pakistan to study with Maulana Dr. Ansari. That was the best decision I ever made in life. I graduated from the Alimi Institute as a scholar of Islam in 1971 at the age of 29. So when I put my foot into the classroom of international relations, I was already graduated from an Institute of Islamic Studies. And so I took with me into the classroom as a particular insight. The 1 year I spent at UWI was one of the most fascinating years in my life, with men of the caliber of Dr. Leslie Manigat. I'm not so impressed with Manigat as president of Haiti.
Right.
I'm more impressed with Manigat in the classroom.
Yes.
But when I left UWI, the Institute of International Relations, and I went to the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva, it was a different kettle of fish altogether. I couldn't find the kind of scholarship I found here in Trinidad. No. And I was invited to stop attending the class of international economics. I was giving so much problems to the scholar, the teacher, Professor Curzon. And we only two West Indians. Because I was recognizing the Western economic theories as bogus, as setting the stage for ruling the world economically and exploiting mankind. And so he called me aside
and
one
in Trinidad, you would have learned a critical view of the global system.
I had men like Leslie Manigat, who was the director of the institute, and he would stand up for 2 hours to lecture. There are some scholars who will speak as though their hearts were made of ice, and they will dissect the way a surgeon cuts a body. Yeah. And you have to respect those scholars because they're really great. But there are other scholars who speak as though their hearts are on fire, and they speak with passion. And that was Leslie Manigat. He spoke with passion, and when in 2 hours when he was finished, his shirt would be wet with perspiration. This is what I found here. But when I went to Geneva, I encountered such problems that Professor Curzon called me aside one day. He said, "Mr. Hussain, you don't have to attend my class, you know. I'm a PhD student at the most famous institution in Europe on a Swiss government scholarship. And my professor tells me, you don't have to attend my class, you know, meaning I don't want you in my class anymore. He says, just write the exam at the end of the year." And I wrote the exam and I passed it. Right. This is the kind of problems I was facing in the classroom, because I already had with me.
What's very interesting too is when V.S. Naipaul went to Oxford on his scholarship from Trinidad, from the Trinidad government, he commented that, you know, Oxford was so parochial. He just couldn't believe how parochial Oxford was. You know, it just has this limited view of the world, and one would think, you know, many people would go there with the illusion that when you go to Geneva, Switzerland, or Oxford, that you are now going to get an insight into the way the world really works. And maybe you do in a certain way, but you don't get a global view. Would you agree?
Vidya Naipaul and Imran share certain things in common. That we both went to QRC.
Okay.
And in those days, there was a feather in your cap. In fact, I would have preferred to have gone to a Christian college, Catholic college, St. Mary's or Presentation, rather than QRC. But my father insisted QRC. And Vidya and I both came from Chaguanas, and his Lion's house is less than a mile from mine.
Okay.
But we differ significantly. I am always grateful to the Lord God that I was born in Trinidad and not in India.
Mm.
I didn't grow up with the baggage of the centuries on my back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful to the Lord God that I grew up in that little village close to Vidya Naipaul, where Indians and Africans live as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up without these prejudices. So I'm always grateful and longing to go back to my home village.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something remarkable for me that Vidya Naipaul, a man with such intelligence, should have such contempt for his roots.
Right. What village is it you are from?
Pardon me?
What's the village you are from?
Oh, Chaguanas, where he grew up, is a little town. Now it's a big town.
Yeah, it's
And just next door to Chaguanas, quarter of a mile, half a mile, is St. Thomas Village, where the cemetery is located, where the government school is located. That's where my family lived for 100 years or more.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. So you found yourself in Switzerland, writing the essay because your professor told you didn't have to attend, and so you then returned to Trinidad and joined the Foreign Service. Is that it, or what happened?
Yes, I returned to Trinidad and joined the Foreign Service. No, before I joined the Foreign Service, they said they wanted me to go back to university and studied international relations. I said I'd be happy to do that. So they gave me a government scholarship to go to UWI, Institute of International Relations. And then I was lucky to get a further scholarship to go on to Geneva to do the PhD in international relations. But I made the mistake of choosing a doctoral thesis on Islam and international relations, not knowing that there were no experts in the world. They were not yet born.
And what year was it?
I left for Geneva in 1974.
Oh.
In order for you to write a doctoral thesis on post-Caliphate Islam, post-Caliphate Islam, and the search for a new international public order, new public order for Islam, you had to know eschatology.
Right.
You had to have the roadmap to the end of history. Right. I did not have eschatology. There was no one in the world who had it at that time. So Professor Kramer, who is the director of the institute, he says, I will be your director of your thesis, but I'm not going to do it. You have to choose somebody. I couldn't find anyone.
Let me just interject. Could you explain what eschatology is for people who may not know?
Eschatology in Christianity and in Judaism is usually explained as the study of the end time, and in particular the signs of the end time. Like, for example, you have Armageddon, the Great War. But I want to redefine eschatology now, because I am pioneering eschatology in Islam. We never had an Islamic eschatology. And I would like to redefine eschatology as a roadmap to the end of history. In the same way that you have a beginning of history, and the study of the beginning of history will help you to understand the movement of history, the emergence of Pax Britannica as a ruling state in the world, and then the movement, the transition from Pax Britannica to a Pax Americana, and both of these characterized by this same obsession of, number one, ruling the world, establishing themselves as a ruling state in the world, that all of mankind must submit to them. And then finally, their obsession with the Holy Land. That Britain has this, the secular state of Britain has this phenomenal obsession with the Holy Land, which led to the Balfour Declaration and so on.
Absolutely.
And then
I'd like to interject here in that this, for many listeners, perhaps they might see this as extremely sort of religious based and part of theology, but I don't think a lot of secular thinkers understand how much this sort of they may not call it eschatology, but it's this, the whole progressive view of history is based on this eschatological viewpoint, whether it be liberals who see progress from primitivism to more material abundance to freedom, or the way Francis Fukuyama talked about the end of history and moving towards, well, we've reached the end in this liberal democracy, to the way Marx and built upon Darwin to speak about the evolution of human society and how we're evolving to a more perfect state. That a lot of things that people dismiss, that secular academics would dismiss as, oh, that's religious superstition and it's not scientific and all this. These very much underpin their own liberal or Marxist models in particular, in ways that they probably don't even understand. Many of these scholars don't even understand that the Harvard they went to, or Cambridge or Oxford, were religious schools first, and that those things permeate the models. So I just wanted to interject that here as you go on, because I know you're very much into it, and I think
that's a very pertinent and a very important observation, Dr. Meighoo. It was something singularly lacking in the scholarship of Dr. Leslie Manigat, the man who inspired me so much. He was pointing to so many trees in the forest.
Yes.
He was identifying this tree and that tree and the other tree. But he lacked the capacity to perceive all the trees together as a forest.
Right.
Therefore, what I'm saying is that he lacked the capacity to recognize the movement of history. If you can understand the movement of history, you can anticipate what's coming ahead, which is the end of history. This is the importance of eschatology.
Yeah. And if I may interject, when you spoke about Sufism and about this inner vision and in seeing with the mind's eye, and this is very much what a historian has to do, and I dare say even scientists, of course, because we are limited in our space-time. We can only experience so much. We can only see, touch, hear, smell, read, so many sensorial inputs for the empirical part. The theoretical part, the deductive part, the things that Plato talks about as opposed to Aristotle, which is having the model in your mind. The way Kepler was able to model the workings of the stars and planets is not because of empirical observation. There's no way you could empirically observe all of those things. You have to have some inner vision, to see it and model it, and then you can sort of test it. And it is, I'm just trying to bridge the gap that many people will believe exists in secular theorizing and the types of things you are talking about. So I just wanted to do that for the benefit.
Yes, there is a lovely word in the English language. I can't find it in French. Whoever coined it did a good job. It's called in and sight. Combine in and sight. Insight.
Right.
Insight. And it is because of the poverty of insight, or because I've not done enough of homework, that I made big mistakes in life as a scholar. Until late in life, I could not distinguish between the fundamental difference between the heart of Russia and the heart of the Soviet Union.
Right.
The role of the Soviet Union in history and the role of the Russia which will emerge from the Soviet Union, get rid of the Soviet Union and recover its spiritual heart. The West is barbarian, but Russia is spiritual.
That is correct. That is absolutely
correct. This is a mistake I made as a scholar. I regret that mistake. The same thing happened with the Ottoman Empire. I have always admired the Ottoman Empire because I was looking with only one eye. I lacked the insight to recognize what was the mysterious role of the Ottoman Empire in sabotaging an end-time friendship and reconciliation and alliance between the world of Islam and the world of Orthodox Christianity led by Russia. That's what the Ottoman Empire did.
Could you explain that a little more? Because that is an intriguing thing, because I myself I'm very interested in this, because it affects the world today profoundly. But that little piece you mentioned, I am not
connected with New Zealand. It is at the heart of what happened in New Zealand, yes. And if I had not been introduced to international relations, I would not have been able to penetrate this subject. But it was insight, really, eventually, that I was able to recognize that the Ottoman Empire played a very mysterious role in history. Mm-hmm. It was empowered with a power we could not explain with normal tools of military analysis.
Right.
And it took everything before it by storm. The Orthodox Christian world could not stand up to the Ottoman Empire.
Correct.
And when the Ottomans defeated the Orthodox Christians in 1052 in Kosovo, the whole rest of the Orthodox Christian world lay at their feet.
I'd like to interject here to speak of the importance of what you're saying, because a lot of people don't realize when the split happened between the Bishop of Rome and the other four bishops of Alexandria, Syria, Damascus, and Jerusalem, there was the five Pentateuch that was the head of the church before. Rome was marginal, and that the heart of Christianity was always in the eastern part, and that's where the New Testament is written in Greek. I mean, the language of the Orthodox Church is Greek. The early church fathers, the letters of Saint Paul, and ties in with the old sort of. So that's how you have the continuity with the ancient Greek philosophers, and you had this tremendous, and that's where the saints went. And when you read the epistles of Saint Paul, it's all in that world, and when Constantinople fell, that's the language I'm using. I don't know if you object to that, but when it fell, it was sort of left to the Western Church to pick up the mantle, but they really were marginal, and so the fall that you're talking about is so important to world history and the history of Christianity. I just wanted to emphasize what you're saying.
Well, I have something to share with you. Mm-hmm. I think you're on the right path. I think you're on the right path, Dr. Meighoo. Yes, I congratulate you. I don't mind saying the fall of Constantinople, because I admire those who defended Constantinople. There were just about 8,000 of them by the Patriarch. And they were intensely religious people. They thought it was the holy state. And they did not want war with the Ottoman Empire. Mm-hmm. The Quran says, but the Turkish president, I don't know whether he has more than a passing acquaintance with the Quran, this present Turkish president, mm-hmm. and the Turkish people. I can't understand that they don't study the Quran. And they're going to be very angry again when I make these comments here on this podcast. Mm-hmm. The Quran says, if your enemy is asking for peace, you must reciprocate. You cannot wage war on an enemy who is seeking peace. This is in the Quran. Mm-hmm. Constantinople did not want war. Mm-hmm. Constantinople was surrounded. It was just a little pocket. Right. There were 200,000 around Constantinople waiting to attack the Ottoman Empire. Mm-hmm. And the Patriarch wanted peace. The Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Sultan took the Quran, put it aside, and attacked. Mm-hmm. When they attacked Constantinople and Constantinople fell, and those who fell while defending Constantinople were heroes. Mm-hmm. And those who attacked it and defeated it were oppressors.
Yes.
Oppressors, that's right. This is the dubious role of the Ottoman Empire. Mm-hmm. But when they took, well, the first thing that the Ottoman Sultan did, which brought eternal shame and disgrace on the world of Islam. And this act is now returning back again to center stage after New Zealand, is that he took the greatest cathedral of the Orthodox Christian world,
Yes.
which had remained the greatest cathedral for 1,000 years, Hagia Sophia. Yes, this was the heart of the Orthodox Christian world after Jerusalem. And he converted it into a masjid. I don't use the word mosque because I don't know where the British got their terms from. A masjid. And he converted it disgracefully, shamefully, and sinfully into a masjid. And it has remained like that for 500 and something years until Mustafa Kemal converted it to a museum.
Right.
They did that to stab a dagger down into the heart of the Orthodox Christian world. It is bleeding to this day.
And
up to this day.
There are two things that I want to ask you about here. Let me just write one down before I forget because they're interesting. But you're mentioning the New Zealand shooting, I believe, because in his manifesto he talks about recapturing Constantinople. Is that correct? And the Hagia Sophia. Is that why you're referring to it? Is that why?
You mean the fellow in New Zealand?
Yes.
The fellow in New Zealand, those who trained him and those who scripted him published a sort of a manifesto just before the attack took place.
Yes.
And in that manifesto, Constantinople is there in pride of place.
That's right.
He uses the name Constantinople and he uses the name Hagia Sophia.
That's right.
And by going into a masjid and killing 50, he didn't want 50. They wanted 500. They didn't get the 500 because the Lord God stopped them. If they had got the 500 they wanted, there would have been millions of people on the streets of Turkey agitating and demanding that Hagia Sophia be reopened as a masjid.
Right.
The Turkish government would then have said to the Russian government, what can we do? And they would then reopen the masjid and hope the Turkey's relations with Russia could survive.
Now, what I would like to clarify with you, and I'd like you to answer this for me because I don't know about this historical fact. So I understand that Moscow sort of became the third Rome and sort of the head and the protector of the Orthodox Christians after the fall of Constantinople. Is it that in Jerusalem that it's the I suppose is it the Russian church that represents the Orthodox there, the Orthodox Christian, and this is the discussion you're talking about that would have had to happen between the Russians and the Turkish state? Am I right? Am I understanding?
The entire Orthodox Christian world still weeps to this day that their greatest cathedral was taken away from them and converted it into a masjid.
Yes.
Our prophet, this is why eschatology is so important. The political science, not only the political scientist, the secular political scientist, not only does not know this, but has no way of knowing this. That our prophet has prophesied that there is going to be the Great War. Yes, it's there in Christian and Jewish eschatology as well. But after the Great War, which is coming now, because they're lusting for it, the next important event in history to take place would be a conquest of Constantinople by a Muslim army, not a Christian army. And he went on to praise that army and praise that commander. The Turkish people and the Muslims of the Balkans and so on have been brainwashed for 600 years with this rubbish that the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1452 fulfilled that prophecy. And so they hold up this Sultan Muhammad Fateh as a man praised by the Prophet, and they praise that army. And I am saying to them, Dr. Meighoo, I've just written a book, Constantinople in the Quran,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably the first book written on the subject. It has never been written before.
Wow.
Never. Constantinople in the Quran, in which I have blasted this falsehood away. The conquest of Constantinople prophesied by the Prophet comes after the Great War. And then I ask myself, why? Why is there this prophesied conquest of Constantinople? And what is going to be its significance? I have been to Moscow, State University of Moscow, and lectured once. And I've been to Belgrade, University of Belgrade, and lectured twice.
And this
over
was
there.
this was I suppose after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yes, I was in Moscow in 2013.
Okay.
And I was in Belgrade in 2015 and 16, 15
Okay.
and 17.
Right.
And my voice, and I praise and I thank the Lord God for this, and my voice, this little boy from Chaguanas, my voice has now reached the Orthodox Christian world. And they are responding wonderfully to my explanation that the conquest of Constantinople, which is also in their eschatology, incidentally. I didn't know this. When I went to Russia, they told me that the conquest of Constantinople, when it's coming, which is still to come, and the Shia also hold the view, same view, that the conquest of Constantinople prophesied by the Prophet is still to come.
Right.
The Shia hold that view. That when this conquest takes place, the most important thing that will take place as a consequence, Dr. Meighoo, is that the cathedral of Hagia Sophia will be returned to the Orthodox Christian world. And we will apologize to them. And number two, that the city will be restored to the name of Constantinople, because that's the name given by the Prophet himself. And so this has come as a bolt in the blue, shattering the Turkish people and the Muslims of Bosnia. If I go there, they'll probably tear me to pieces, because it's 600 years of brainwashing, you see?
Yes,
But the entire Christian world now is anticipating, waiting. They don't have to conquer Constantinople, because if they attempt to do that, it'll be Christian-Muslim warfare.
Right.
But if we conquer Constantinople and we return the cathedral to them, this will lay, of course, NATO doesn't like to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be the foundation for reconciliation, friendship, and alliance.
That's right.
Between the world of Islam and the world of Orthodox Christianity, and those Christians of the Western world whose hearts have not been corrupted by Santa Claus.
Now, okay, there's 2 points I want to put in here. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating discussion. Now, one thing I would now you see, I'm coming to a lot of these very similar conclusions to you, but I'm not coming from an eschatological perspective. You know, I'm coming from I think there is some metaphysical aspect to the way I'm approaching it as well. But it's also very much based in historical facts as well. So
maybe you maybe have an angel with you.
Perhaps, I don't know. But here's one thing I've thought about that I'd like to know if you have put in your own theory. So the same theory you're talking about with the Ottomans, so this interpretation is very important. I've not heard it before. I think it's fascinating. So about the Ottomans and then their power that and I don't know if you want to call it evil, but what it certainly was a negative power, and maybe it's part of the story, however we interpret it. But that power, that unstoppable power, which caused that injustice to happen, I'd be interested to what you have to say about the Mughals in India, because one thing that I think the world does not understand properly is the Mongol Empire, right? And that whether it be today in the Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, the ruling families still trace their lineage back to Genghis Khan. The Ottomans are are descended from Genghis Khan. And same with the Mughals in India, it's from Genghis Khan. And and the Russian Empire too has largely taken over the lands in Asia from Genghis Khan. And that the importance of Genghis Khan in world history has simply not been taught. We don't understand the vastness of the territory he conquered, and then how it broke up after he died into the various khanates, and the importance of the Mughal Empire in history, of the Ottoman Empire in history, and that these are echoes of Genghis Khan. Does that fit into your understanding of history at all? To me, I'm making a link there that that perhaps Genghis Khan was this negative force driving history. I don't know. Do you see that?
Forgive me, Dr. Meighoo, for repeating myself again. I believe I must congratulate you, yes. It is rare for me to find in this world of intellectual darkness those who have a light and who can see and understand the similarities between that part of the Russian world which became an empire under the Tsars, under the Tsars, or imperialists. They did not represent Christianity, no.
Right.
The Tsars, and that's why they were called great people. Peter the Great is great for the Western world.
Right.
Catherine the Great because they made her great. And these are the ones who took the sword and went out east and conquered and recreated that Russian Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, which had this unmatchable power, unstoppable power, and used that power for ends which were essentially oppressive. And the Mughal Empire in India, which played, again, another very sinister role in history. And the link you established between all of these and the Mongols, Genghis Khan, it's a remarkable insight on the part of you, Dr. Meighoo. I congratulate you for that.
Thank you. I've not seen anybody else make it. So I'm glad to hear your validation.
Yes. No, I believe you are the right path if you continue your research to be able to establish the link firmly between the Mongols and the Ottoman Empire, between the Mongols and the Mughal Empire in India, between the Mongols and that part of Russia which became an imperialist power. In India, you can see how the Mughals set up the Muslim community of India to land in the pit of fire in which they now are located. If I were a Hindu, I would hate Islam. Yes. If I were a Hindu, I would hate Islam, because I never invited you to come and rule over me. You came from the point of an Afghan sword from Afghanistan to rule over India by brute force. And you ruled over India for so many years, and the wound is still bleeding.
Yes.
And so if a Hindu has a little difficulty in looking at Islam dispassionately, looking at Islam with a clean slate, a clean heart, you have to forgive him because he's bleeding, okay? It would be very helpful if Islamic scholarship and Muslim leaders in India and elsewhere would come forward and call a spade, as I have done with the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans did many good things, sure. Santa Claus also does some good things, yeah. But it is still a false theory. The Mughals, of course, did certain good things. They're not stupid. But the bottom line is that Mughal rule over India. There were Muslim rule before the Mughals, but they're never ruling India. The Mughals rule over India. It was imperialism, and Islam is not imperialism. And so we have to begin the process now of addressing the predicament of the Muslims in India and a warmongering Hindu government today in India, which does not represent Hinduism, which is destroying Hinduism. Yes, I have to say this to my Hindu brothers, that the Indian government today is not representative of Hinduism. No, it is destroying Hinduism. It's taking Hinduism for a ride. And if Hindus recognize that, and if Muslims recognize that this Saudi royal family with his Mohammed bin bin Salman and his murder of the Khashoggi and so on, that these are not people who represent Islam at all. Then it will be helpful for us to be able to respond in a better way to the big problem between India and Pakistan today.
Absolutely.
You have to hold the bull by the horns and have the courage and integrity to call a spade and declare that Mughal rule over India, Muslim Mughal rule over Hindu India must be condemned. It was oppression. And this is not Islam. And apologize to the Hindus. And then you can begin the process now of building bridges between those Muslims and those Hindus whose hearts are not filled with hatred for each other.
That is an amazing thing. These are amazing things I'm hearing from you, and I am so glad to understand more your perspective on these things. I'm really blown away, and the world needs to know this. The world needs to know this. Wow, there's so many so many topics I want to talk about as well. But okay, one thing from a global perspective is and this eschatological perspective, where does China fit in all of this?
The Chinese represent a proud and ancient civilization which is too proud to bend its knee before an oppressor who wants to rule the world. Mm-hmm. You can do business with the Chinese, yes, but you cannot force them to bend their knee before you. An arrogant, a warmongering United States of America has now seems to be driven to madness by the touch of Satan, taking their stupid attempts to rule the world over Venezuela. But they don't understand. They will never understand because they're devoid of knowledge now. The rest of Europe are laughing at them. You cannot bring regime change to Venezuela unless you can kill 1 million Venezuelans. When will you understand that?
Yeah.
Will South America accept killing 1 million South Americans? When will the United States understand it? They have lost the capacity to think.
That's
but
right.
the Chinese have not lost the capacity to think. And the Chinese are moving forward with political, military, economic, monetary initiatives which are intelligent and sensible. While from Washington, all you're getting is stupidity. Right? China has a role to play in history.
Absolutely.
China by itself cannot stand up militarily to the West. No. So obviously, from the time the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia re-emerged with its authentic spiritual heart,
yes,
and the Russian Orthodox Christian faith will never bend its knee to Western Christianity. The Orthodox Christian says we prefer the turban of the Sultan to the hat of the cardinal.
Yep.
When Constantinople was about to fall, that's what they said. We prefer the turban of the Sultan to the cardinal's hat, meaning we prefer to be slaves of Muslims, but we'll not join with you and give up our Orthodox Christian faith. So when China saw that returning to Russia, you can trust this Russia now, that this Russia will not betray you, that this Russia will remain firmly resisting the oppressors of the world.
And you know, what I'd like to also interject here is that, you know, a lot of, Christianity was introduced to most of, to the Western world, English-speaking people and now we're English-speaking people through the Western church. And so people only understand Christianity as the Western church, who, especially here in Trinidad and in America and Canada and so forth. And they have very, very, very little understanding of the Eastern church. But what I like to to tell people is that historically speaking, right, I'm not speaking necessarily from an eschatological perspective, but it probably matches up because the metaphysical and the physical are linked. But that historically speaking, the Eastern Orthodox Church is the Church of Jesus. I mean, it is the Church of the Apostles. That is where all these things happened. It is where on the road to Damascus. It is, where the Holy Land is. It is, and when the apostles went out to form their churches, even out in India, when St. Thomas went to India, it is in the Eastern Orthodox Church. It's only Peter that went to Rome. But the other, all the apostles were there, and that is where, and as I said, the Greek speaking, etc., is all part of a direct historical line back to Jesus in a way that the Western Church wasn't. And when you talk about Santa Claus, yes, the Easter Bunny, the Yule logs, the worshiping of the tree, and those things are not from the tradition of the original church. And I think a lot of people who come from the Western tradition, whether it be Catholic or Protestant, have never even considered that, and it's so important. So I just wanted to raise, and so that's the importance when you're talking about the reconciliation between the Russian church and the Islamic world, because it comes from the same root there in those lands. Yes. So I wanted to emphasize that.
The Chinese recognize that they could trust this Russia.
Yeah.
Because this Russia is sincere in its heart. It's Orthodox Christian. It's not the Soviet Union.
Yes.
And so one of the amazing phenomena of modern contemporary international relations is the establishment of this amazing alliance between China and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
It is an unbreakable alliance now.
Yeah.
And this must drive terror in the hearts of the oppressor.
For students of political history, that's very important, because during the communist period, Chinese communism and Soviet communism were opposed, and you saw this in Southeast Asia with Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam and Korea, that you had these rivalries between Chinese communism and Soviet communism, whereas Mao Zedong was a more kind of third world communist, and the Russians were a different type of imperialist type of thing. So and people in the West, when you look at CNN or something, they're talking about it's despotic countries coming together, and they still think of Russia as being communist. What you're describing here is a very, very different thing. It is, and the basis is entirely different.
Not only is Russia not communist, but I think it's archaic to say that China is communist. China is no longer communist. China is essentially nationalist.
Yes.
And that's why the Chinese will not bend their knee. But the next alliance is the one that is more frightening to the West. The Quran has spoken and said that there is going to be, in the end time, a Christian people who are going to be closest in love and affection for the Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
And has described these Christian people as the people whose religious faith is their primary identity. They're not secularized.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they have the institution of the priesthood intact.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, they have monasticism still intact. Today in the Western world, the monastery is a McDonald's hamburger.
Yes.
And finally, the Quran describes these Christian people as the people who are not arrogant. They don't have the arrogance of wanting to rule all the world.
Mm-hmm.
They are people who follow Jesus, and as a consequence, you see they're so polite. Look at Russian diplomacy today.
Yes.
Look at the way the Russian foreign minister.
Yeah, Lavrov is an amazing man. Amazing man.
Yes, and one of the best examples of diplomacy that is successful is Russian diplomacy today. Okay,
Yeah.
so I have said, and my world of Islamic scholarship, of course, is fast asleep. What can I do for that? I have said that the people that the Quran is speaking about is the Orthodox Christian world.
Right.
And yes, and the conquest of Constantinople, which is to come after the Great War, and the return of Hagia Sophia to the Christian world is going to facilitate the emergence of that Orthodox Christian world as a people with the greatest love and affection for the Muslim world. And so we are moving towards a time in history when you have a formidable alliance between Russia and China, and an emerging alliance between Russia and the world of Islam, and Mohammed bin Salman can't stop it.
And this alliance, you are not seeing the Russian-Turkish alliance today as being that, or are you?
I am reminded, Dr. Meighoo, that the present Turkish government looks back with great nostalgia at the Ottoman Empire, and they have been floating for many years now, floating the idea of a neo-Ottoman Empire being restored. In order for that neo-Ottoman Empire to be restored, you're going to have to attack the Orthodox Christians again.
Yes.
You'll have to defeat them. You'll have to enslave their women and use their women as your concubines. You'll have to, when you defeat them, in order for a truce to take place, they'll have to sign on the dotted line that they'll give you so many of their boys. And you'll choose the strongest, the most intelligent boys, aged 10, 12 years of age. And then you will convert them to Islam by force, to the eternal shame and disgrace of the world. The people of Turkey are going to be very angry with me when I reveal these things. And then you'll take these young boys and train them to become the elite fighting force of the Ottoman Empire, superbly educated. And then when the Ottoman army goes to fight a Christian people, their own sons will be at the forefront fighting them.
That's right.
This is to add salt to the wound. This is the Ottoman Empire. And the present Turkish government has nostalgia for that Ottoman Empire, and probably is meandering its way through a diplomatic maze how they could restore the Ottoman Empire. But the Russian president is not a fool. The Russian government are not fools. So they're playing their game very carefully with this this Turkish president, very carefully. The reason why he could not use the incident in New Zealand to make some noise about reopening Hagia Sophia for prayers for the masjid is because he has calculated what will be the risk with his relations with Russia.
Yes.
Yes. And with the Orthodox Christian world, because I have done a lot of work. I have done a lot of work in the Orthodox Christian world, and now they know Islamic eschatology. And they have great love for me now in the Orthodox Christian world. So they know what our prophet has prophesied. Yes, they know that there's a conquest of Constantinople coming, and that Hagia Sophia will be returned to them. They know this. So if he were to have used what happened in New Zealand to reopen Hagia Sophia for worship as a masjid, you could imagine how Russia would have responded. Yes, his hands are tied. I don't have much respect for the Turkish president for other reasons as well. Gaddafi in Libya, many times acted as a clown, yes, but maybe it was a show, it was drama for him to do something behind it, because he was trying to introduce a new monetary system for Africa. Yeah. And he repatriated all of Libya's gold back to Libya.
Yeah.
If Libya had succeeded, the French franc finished.
Yes.
The French franc would have been finished. France would have become a third world country. So France led the way. for the regime change in Libya.
Yeah.
And they use Muslims, who of course can be bought and sold like prostitutes, to come and fight on their behalf. So Libya today is a NATO country.
Right.
Guess who was the first to land in Tripoli to congratulate them when the regime took place? The first to land were the British Prime Minister and the French President.
Right.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Mm-hmm.
That was not surprising. But the next to land was Erdogan, because Turkey was up to its neck in the effort to overthrow Gaddafi and restore and cause Libya to become another NATO country.
Mm-hmm.
All these legions of Muslims who left Trinidad to go fight in that bogus jihad in Syria, who helped them? How did they get into Syria? It's Turkey. Turkey opened her borders to them and allowed them to transit through Turkey, supported logistically by Turkey to get into Syria.
Wow, this is fascinating, and you have done the segue for me. An angel must be guiding us, because I wanted to talk about Trinidad being this small little island, not only producing your brilliant mind, but also producing the greatest number per capita of ISIS fighters in Syria, and why. And you've mentioned this now, so this is the first I've heard of it. It's an intriguing thing. But let's even take a step back a little, because a lot of people around the world are totally surprised that a country in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, or Trinidad in particular, because it's not Tobago, it's our island, Trinidad, that is sending these ISIS fighters. Why do you think that's happening? Yes, Turkey is facilitating it, but what are the underlying causes that you see?
Number one, there's this Protestant version of Islam, that Islam has been attacked in the same way that Western Christianity was attacked. The Roman Catholic Church still preserved the spiritual heart of the Christian way of life.
Right.
But that spiritual heart of the Christian way of life was attacked by Protestantism, mm-hmm. which delivered a Christianity devoid of a spiritual heart, and which was now relegated to simply a text.
Right.
You live by the text, yeah. The same thing happened with Islam, and the attack took place, and the Wahhabi Salafi movement emerged in Islam, which was devoid of the spiritual heart of Islam.
Right.
And the comparison.
If I can tie this into our previous discussion, for people who may not be able to tie it in, you will have it in the back of your mind easily. But this is what you're talking about in terms of the Sufism and the inner eye, and so that God is not just contained within a book, right? This is precisely what the Orthodox Church says. It's also what the Roman Catholic Church says. So this is why at the beginning I was looking at the Protestant Catholic divide, because the Protestant and the literalism is that everything is contained in the text in the book is very different from the Catholic one, which still has its ties to natural law. To me, natural law is the ultimate in metaphysical truth, right? And that is grounded in natural law. And so what you're saying is that the same thing that happened in the Christian church, to take out the inner eye and just look at a text, that gutted the religion of its spirit. In the Catholic Church, you're saying that this happened in Islam as well, in this in the Saudi Arabia, which was facilitated by Britain when they were breaking up the Ottoman Empire and having Lawrence of Arabia go and blow up the railway from Istanbul to Mecca and Medina and so forth. In that time when they were allowing all these heretical forms to come up and so forth. So Wahhabism, in alliance with the House of Saud, they renamed the peninsula Saudi Arabia even. I mean, That now was transferred to Trinidad and actually to Chechnya, to Nigeria, to the Philippines, to all these places. And you're saying that this happened in Trinidad. Am I correct in interpreting?
That's right. We have had, they are a minority. They are a small minority in Trinidad. They certainly do not constitute anything more than an insignificant number.
And would you say these
but
are
they
more
are
recent converts, or because in Trinidad we have a lot of recent converts to Islam, and many of them are from a Christian African background, and then you have the people more from, you know, who have been Muslim from their ancestors' days in India. Do you see that being part of it or not?
I hesitate to answer this question because the subject is far more complex than simply who are those who have just converted to Islam and who have not. But let it suffice to say that the number of people who are part of this bogus jihad in Syria are a small minority of the Muslim community in Trinidad.
Okay.
But Protestant Islam is gaining ground. It's gaining ground because of this lack of internal insight. And it's not confined to the Muslim community as well.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would that a minority of people in Trinidad and Tobago today have the capacity to recognize that the political system that we've inherited from Britain and with which we've had to live these last 60, 70 years, it's not taking us anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The society is collapsing. The two main political parties are playing a game of musical chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And people remain like sheep and like goats, supporting their political party with a blindness that is shameful and disgraceful. And the number of people who say, I don't want to be a part of this, what Kamaluddin will call this tamasha, this stupid political system that we have today. Yeah. The collapsing society. That's why I'm so happy that you're no longer a politician. I prefer to see you in politics, but not in electoral politics. Mm. We need politicians in this country to get out of this electoral politics. Don't believe that a political party which will fight the elections and win the elections will bring the change. That's nonsense. No. Because the people are too brainwashed, supporting their particular tribe, and they'll never give up the support of their political tribe. So the only place you could look for some progress is something they call shamefully so. Shamefully so, they call them marginal constituencies. Right. I think that is graceful. To call a people marginal, it's something disgusting. Yes, it's disgusting. And if that is politics, I don't want a part of it. So we have a lot of sheep and goats in this country today. A lot of sheep and cattle in this country today. It's not just Muslims who are brainwashed. It's the entire population. And people like you and others who can stand out of the political, the electoral divide, get out of that, get out of party politics, and give to the country an insight into politics and to say, we are capable of doing something better than this. This is a collapsing society. Your system has failed. And we need to give religion a chance to do what religion can do, but not those Muslims who have left Islam and have now become part of the Santa Claus Jamaat, and those Christians and those Hindus who have left Christianity and Hinduism and become part of the SUV Jamaat, all right? But those Christians and those Hindus and those Muslims who still preserve the values of religion and who have the spiritual insight, come and show what religion has to do to offer. This is a political initiative that you people should offer to the country.
All right. Just before I leave the subject, because I'm not 100% satisfied with our discussion as to why Trinidad has become such a, like for instance, Guyana has a lot of Muslims. Why Trinidad? Why? I know we have a larger population of Muslims than other places in the Caribbean, but you know, Suriname has a lot of Muslims, Guyana has a lot of Muslims, and
Okay.
Trinidad has become a particularly.
All right. I'll answer you.
Okay.
I'll answer you. Okay. I can be wrong,
Okay.
but I believe that Trinidad was singled out.
Okay.
And there's a reason why Trinidad was singled out. The Saudis sent their people in.
Okay.
Our immigration officers closed their eyes
Right.
as the Saudis entered with briefcases filled with dollars. And the Saudis went to different masajid to distribute money. Immigration knew about it. They did nothing about it. And these people were bought tickets for you and the entire family and this and that and the other to go and fight.
Right.
Where you can buy cattle, you can buy sheep, and prostitutes are all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people who are probably not happy. Some of them were in the 18 who were arrested for was it conspiring to assassinate the prime minister?
Yes. There was an alleged
government
prime minister. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that came from Disneyland or from Hollywood, but a plot to assassinate the prime minister and to overthrow the government, and 18 people were arrested and nobody was charged to this day, and no apologies up to now. So they were bitter in their hearts.
Yes.
Some of them ended up in Syria.
Right.
Some of them were killed. That could explain part of it.
Yeah.
But the other part of the story is, I believe that this island, not Tobago, Trinidad, was blessed with a divine endowment not given to many parts of the world.
I agree.
Number one, that we are small island. We are small islands, so you can't live separate. You got to rub shoulders, number one. You cannot run away from the intellectual fight. No, you're too small. Number two, we have many different races and tribes living together in this island. And you have to put your political acumen to work to recognize that this is a tribally diverse society and you need a political system that will be appropriate for a tribally diverse polity.
And if I may interject my metaphysical, my own metaphysical understanding here, you know, this is, I don't know where it comes from, but before our ancestors came here, whether it be Indian or African or European, even among the Amerindians, this was an incredibly diverse island. You had
I didn't know that.
You had at least 14 different Amerindian tribes here. In terms of the ecological diversity in Trinidad, our ecological diversity per square kilometer is greater than so many areas. We have our beach, you know, our beach ecosystems, our montane ecosystems, our tropical rainforest systems, ecosystems, our savanna ecosystems. There is something special about this place that goes beyond.
I'm glad that you filled me in on this. So we have a tribally diverse polity, living cheek by jowl in a small island. And despite the political divide, despite the racial rivalry and animosity, we have not yet experienced bloodshed. No.
Right.
Indeed, we have survived it so far with remarkable tribal harmony, despite the political divide.
That's right.
Yes. Number two, that this is an island in which Islam and Christianity and Hinduism, three world religions, live side by side. And more importantly, they live in a state of harmony with each other. That we have not experienced the kind of Islamophobia. We've not experienced the bitter war on Islam and the demonization of Muslims in Trinidad as we experience elsewhere. And so there are, and now I'm talking to the political scientists, and so I'm saying that there are possibilities that exist over here which do not exist elsewhere.
Yes.
And for these possibilities to be exploited, we need men of thought, of wisdom, of insight, of political wisdom. And it is because of this possibility that Trinidad could play a role in society, in the world,
Yes.
which would be detrimental for those who are destroying the world. That Trinidad was selected to bring all these US dollars and to send all these cattle and sheep to go and fight in Russia, in Syria.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, you've just given so much food for thought there, you know. And just another thing I want to mention, even the Amerindians, they recognize this island as special in their own understanding of creation, right? Their own creation myths and so forth. Trinidad represented the northern end of the universe, and Naparima Hill held up the northern end of the universe, and somewhere on the continent, either in Venezuela or Colombia, was the southern end. And the first man was in their mythology was created on Naparima Hill, and the first man was also the first canoe builder, because for them the building of canoes was the primary sacred holy act. Because they almost lived in the water. They lived by their canoe. For them, Guyana, Venezuela, Trinidad was not a separate entity. It was connected by the water, not divided by the water. And so even for them, we held this extremely special role. So I just find this fascinating to be able to bounce these ideas off you. But, you know, we've been talking so long, and I don't want to test my listeners' patience further. but if we are to approach a sort of conclusion, I mean, in sum, what would you say your main message that you want to put out to the world is? Because you do have a global audience.
I'm glad that you asked that question, because I do not want it to appear that I'm condemning all the people of the West.
Mm-hmm.
On the contrary, some of the brightest scholars, some of the most acute thinkers, some of the most courageous people to stand up to the American government and the British government and the French government and the German government have been people from the West.
Yes.
Some of the most pious people as Christians and as Jews who have stood up against the oppression of the state of Israel are from the West.
Yep.
So I don't want to appear that I'm condemning all the people of the West. The message that I want to give is that it's time for us to try to come together, all those who stand against the oppressor,
mm-hmm.
all those who condemn oppression, and all those who are struggling to liberate the oppressed, regardless of whether we are Christians or Muslims or Hindus or Jews. We must stand together on one platform, and this is a platform of truth. And truth, Dr. Meighoo, has zero tolerance for oppression.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Truth, Dr. Meighoo, truth has zero tolerance for oppression.
I love that. That is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. You know, you've had a very long journey in your life to reach where you have, and the influence and so forth, and you've experienced many things. If reflecting back, is there anything you would maybe have done differently or changed in your path?
I believe that had I devoted more attention to the spiritual quest as a young student, I could not understand at that young age. I could not understand what is the link between knowledge and spirituality. The acquisition of knowledge, the search for knowledge, the quest for knowledge, and spirituality. This epistemological link I never understood until later in life. Had I understood this epistemological link, that knowledge does not come only from external observation and experimentation and rational inquiry, that there's also knowledge which is internally received. But you will not be able to get the gift of knowledge internally received until, as a farmer, you go and you plow the field and you plant the seeds. You can't reap unless you plant.
Yes.
And so you have to go into the world of scholarship and burn the midnight oil and show integrity as a scholar. And when you have knowledge, if you are scared to proclaim it because they're going to put my name on a no-fly list, my business might collapse. They're going to say I'm a terrorist.
Yeah.
I will lose all the handouts that the government gives me as a prostitute. I know I go myself and prostitute before the government support to get these handouts. I will lose all these things. If I had understood this link, this epistemological link, that knowledge is also internally acquired. And in order for you to get that internal knowledge, the oil has to be pure and the lamp has to be lit.
Yeah.
I learned that too late.
Right. So what would you recommend to a young person listening to this podcast right now?
If you are a Muslim, then I say, let the Quran become the love of your life. Yes. But you cannot study the Quran in English. No. The miraculous word of the God, the miraculous word can only be studied in the language in which it was revealed. The Quran cannot be translated. Number two, there's a world of a difference between reading and studying. Reading, you can read from the top of the page to the bottom. But for studying, you need a methodology for study, the art of critical thinking. And if you'll allow me a minute now, the Quran asks us to look up at the stars. For the uncritical eye, the stars are just a jumble of beautiful stars and they twinkle beautifully. But for the critical eye of the astronomer, the navigator on the seas, he has to make meaning and purpose of this jumble of stars. He has to understand how they are interconnected with each other. He has to understand the whole forest, which is what Dr. Leslie Manigat did not have. This was what was lacking in his scholarship. And only when you have the mastery understanding of the whole will you be able to see, now this is the direction I want to go. This is the art of critical thinking. You don't study anything piecemeal. No. If the society is collapsing, you can't just build bridges and build roads to be able to arrest the collapse. You need a holistic approach. You need to study the subject as a whole, all its disparate parts. And you have to understand how they are linked to each other. It is as though, Dr. Meighoo, and this is my final comment, that there is a balance which keeps everything in equilibrium. Not only in the entire material universe, but also in society. And this balance was ordained by the Lord God. And when you come with your nationalist party, as he came in 1956, and when you come with your nationalism, your secular nationalism, and you don't understand even two peanuts about that balance. Okay?
Yes.
And you now preside over the destruction of the balance in society.
Yes.
So I say to the young man who is listening to me and the young woman, because a lot of women are listening to me now, yes. I say, you have to study with insight to locate the balance in society. And when you locate that balance, you then be able to recognize falsehood very easily, even when falsehood has a mask on its face.
Yeah. Excellent. Could you just let us know about some of the activities you have upcoming, both immediately and over the next 5 years? I know you have something up in London soon, and I know you're working on some books and so forth.
Yes, I have my Sunday morning IBN, the Islamic Broadcasting Meighoo. They gave me from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock Trinidad time, which is about 12 o'clock.
Is that available
And
globally as well, or is that just?
yes. It's broadcast on the internet. Yeah,
Right.
you can view it live. And I'm commenting at this time on what the India-Pakistan problem, the Venezuela problem, and now New Zealand. But I also have a lecture at UWI coming up on the 4th of April at the Institute of International Relations, and I'll be very happy if you can attend. It's between 2 and 3 on April 4th.
I will definitely attend.
Very good. And then we're talking on Islam, the Great War, and beyond. So it's a walk through history.
Right.
And then on the 27th of April, we're going to have the launch of my book, Constantinople in the Quran, which is written at this the correct time. This is in London, and on my YouTube channel, there is a link for the registration. And then on the 28th, I'll be lecturing 28th of April in Birmingham on the Great War, which is coming, the Armageddon or Malhama. In Birmingham, again on the YouTube channel, you'll find the link for registration. On the 3rd of May, I speak in London again on the strategic importance of the fast of Ramadan. And then on the 5th of May, Ramadan will begin.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for all your work, for your sacrifice, and for your commitment to your vision. I truly believe that it's extremely important to be understood, as I said, and known widely as possible throughout the world. And I think this conversation has been extremely important to the addition of global knowledge, and I really do hope that this reaches as many people as possible. So I want to thank you very much for not only doing the podcast, but for everything you have done and continue to do.
Thank you, Dr. Meighoo, and I look forward to meeting with you. I've not met you as yet. We just met on the internet.
That's correct.
I look forward to meeting you again. Thank you, and you've honored me with an invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's it for Independent Thought and Freedom this week. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, let people know about this, spread it far and wide, and enjoy the rest of your week. And I will see you next week again. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.